Ladies and gentlemen, it's 6 o'clock in London, it's 1 p.m. in New York, 1 a.m. in Hong Kong, 3 a.m. in Sydney, 10 a.m. in San Francisco, and 10:30 at night in Mumbai. More importantly, ladies and gentlemen, it is 1 p.m. in Nassau, in the Bahamas. We are coming to you today from our second ever site visit. Last month, of course, we were at the Intercontinental Exchange. We were inside the Ice House in London. Today, we are at a really, really exciting new exchange venue, ArawakX, the new Pan-Caribbean Stock Exchange. I'm here suffering, as you can see, the indignity of having to work from the beach during the course of the days and afternoons in order to bring you the Exchange Invest Daily newsletter. The sort of terrible things that we have to suffer, ladies and gentlemen, for our art in bringing you information and news about the world of financial markets and exchanges. So our guest today, well, this is it, Series 7, Episode 6. It's the end of the 7th series, ladies and gentlemen, which means we've reached perhaps the ultimate answer to life, the universe, and everything, if you're a fan of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, because this is Episode 42. Our guest today is Rahming Sr. We're coming here live from ArawakX, the new Caribbean exchange. It's your creation. You're a Northwestern University Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering. You're an MBA from the Kellogg School of Management. You're a former COO of the Bahamas International Securities Exchange, BISX, and you were a former Technical Operations Manager of the Globex Control Center at Reuters America. Everybody, of course, remembers that great heyday of Globex when it was the epicenter of off-hours trading, when we still had floors as well as having electronic trading. As a lecturer, you've been a member of the Board of Trustees of the University of Bahamas. You have a multiplicity of different exciting strings to your bow, including being treasurer of the Bahamas Olympic Committee. And indeed, I do believe you're a former columnist for the Tribune and the Nassau Guardian, which is actually how we came to meet virtually, because good grief, I mean, back when, you know, the printed thing was still the way that people were writing stuff down and recording their books, I wrote Capital Market Revolution in 1999, and DRC picked up a copy and was good enough to give me a wonderful, glowing review. So here we are. It's payback, 21 years on, DRC. It's a pleasure to see you today. How are you?
I'm doing absolutely fantastic, and it's great to be here, and it's amazing to be here.
I have to say, DRC, it's even more amazing that we're here in COVID times. We went through, my wife and I, 4 different cities last week. We've had so many COVID tests. I'm not sure that we've actually got any nostril tension hair left or anything like that. Probably too much detail, ladies and gentlemen. Terribly sorry about that. But it's certainly been quite an emotional roller coaster to get here. So tell me, we're in Nassau, the capital of the Bahamas, ArawakX, your baby. Explain to me a little bit about how you came to be here.
Well, you know, I had a career that began with exchanges, with Reuters at the Mercantile Exchange. We were headquartered there. There was a project between the Mercantile Exchange, the Board of Trade, and the Matif, I think it was. And as you stated, was to try and bring electronic markets to futures markets, which were open outcry. And so that was where my career kind of began. And of course, the Chicago winters drove me out of Chicago and into back home. And here I managed to, as the first exchange came about, was the chief operating officer of that exchange and was instrumental in helping to build that out. And then went into my own management consulting business. And then, lo and behold, these crowdfunding rules came about. And I thought, why not? Let's do it. And I got a full marketplace and clearing and facility license in order to operate a full exchange, beginning with the crowdfunding rules.
But that's absolutely fabulous. So ArawakX, the whole emphasis is on small, medium enterprises.
Yes, on startups, really. We saw a gaping hole in the U.S. startup and the Caribbean startup market, in that most of them are not funded. And one of the reasons most of them are not funded is because venture capitalists are not typically Caribbean people, or so about 6% of some 63,000 startups that we can count have not have adequate funding. So we thought, what an excellent opportunity to provide to fill a hole in that marketplace by doing capital raises over the internet.
And that's really interesting because, I mean, the Bahamas, I suppose from the outside, people would think of the Bahamas as an incredibly prosperous, low-tax jurisdiction. But what you're telling me is that there are certain holes in the fabric of cyberspace that aren't allowing businesses to really get going.
Well, one thing is there's an over-reliance on the tourism product. And so the Bahamas has been quite prosperous, and areas of the Caribbean have been prosperous compared to, some of the other, what you guys would call the third world. However, we saw when COVID hit that what that does to an economy that's totally dependent on tourism. And one thing that I had recognized through the management consulting was that there are a lot of great brands here in the Caribbean, in the Bahamas, and there are a lot of great brands that are never going to realize their full potential because they didn't have the capital to expand into other markets. And so, that was one of the big reasons for the exchange, to bring the innovative side. We have a problem in the islands of a brain drain, where people like myself go away to university, get really good jobs outside of the country, and then never return to the country. So I returned to the country, and I wanted my children to do the same. And I know that many of my colleagues and contemporaries, that was their wish for them to have the capacity to do it. And not everybody wants to work in a hotel.
Well, obviously that's a huge thing, because clearly Bahamian tourism is a massive driving factor in the economy.
Yes, it is massive, and there are a lot of advantages to it, and we've done well with it. We have a great tourist product, and we have great natural resources, but suddenly the whole world is caught on to tourism. So you can't even, places that were war-torn just a while ago, like I have a niece that went on honeymoon to Croatia. And, I wouldn't think of going to Croatia because I remember other things from Croatia, but apparently when I looked it up, it's absolutely gorgeous and a beautiful tourist spot. So there's a lot of competition in that nowadays. And also, while we have some great areas to still develop with our tourist market, a lot of tourism products are such as attractions and things like that are still coming forward. That's not the only part of our sector that can be developed.
So you've got a huge reliance on tourism. It's interesting the point you make about Croatia. Actually, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to say that the chief executive of the Zagreb Stock Exchange, Ivana Gazic, is going to be a guest on the show. Wow. Watch this space. It's coming up in about 5 or 6 weeks' time. I'm really looking forward to that conversation about, indeed, how the Balkans have rebuilt themselves over the course of the last 15, 20 years. Absolutely fascinating discussion there. So tourism is obviously a hugely dominant product, possibly not unrelated to the issues that the Bahamas have geographically. I mean, you're blessed with 300 and something days of sun. You've got incredible sandy beaches, a vast number of islands. It's generally actually lives up to its name of being paradise in many ways.
I think so. This was a great place to grow up, and it's a great place to raise a family. So one of the ideas we had was that let's use the brand of the Bahamas to do what we call nearshoring.
Yes.
So that we can build out the ecosystem of the Bahamas. There are a lot of well-educated business developers, lawyers, accountants, etc. And this idea of nearshoring is that by bringing small and medium enterprise startups here, we can actually vet them properly. And so people can have confidence that the companies that are on our exchange are real companies. And on the other hand, we can develop those companies, and people are very happy to be here to develop. I have not yet met anybody of many that I've spoken to that said, I don't want to be in the Bahamas.
Well, certainly. I mean, unless for some reason you've got an affliction for only skiing 365 days of the year, it's hard to see why you wouldn't want to be in this paradisical environment, as indeed you can see from the photographs, ladies and gentlemen, where I was producing the new Exchange Invest newsletter yesterday for today's production. So we're live from ArawakX, the new Caribbean exchange. Talk to me a little bit, though, about building a whole new stock exchange. When you've got a crowdfunding platform, a stock exchange, and a CSD, all of those licenses. How long did it take you to get from scratch to where we are now, fully licensed?
Well, it took about 4 years to get the license. The regulators were very thorough in making sure that we would be able to do this license and to operate it effectively. And along that journey has been many collaborations. And that's one of the reasons that I reached out to you.
Yep.
And I wanted to have an exchange that was world-class, because one thing that the exchange world has shown is that the boundaries have been eliminated. So any product that we were to put out as an exchange now is not competing with local exchanges or regional exchanges. It's actually a product that has to be compatible with anything that's out there in the world, and to use the best technology. So I turned to a lot of my old friends and colleagues, from the economists in Chicago who taught me, to my study technology partner at Northwestern, who had built a great company in Silicon Valley. He builds and sells companies in Silicon Valley, cloud-based, and tried to go around the world and find the best fitting technology that could be integrated to provide a world-class experience for the exchange.
So this world-class experience exchange, let me ask one question, because obviously in this country we have the Bahamian dollar. Now that can be a little bit tricky to get money in and out of on occasion. How have you worked around that, or how are you working around that?
So one of the good things about it is, it's terrible, but it's good as well, is that when our economy collapsed, all of a sudden people are really listening to us as to how to improve the economy. And you can think of the Bahamas as an island that was for a long time surrounded by a wall. And around this wall is just a sea of the world, of currency, of different instruments, of competitors, but what an exchange does, and one of the great fears of the Bahamas, is that we would be overwhelmed, that the foreigners would have much more capital than us. They would come in, they would drive up the land prices. We would not be we'd be overwhelmed in our own country. So what the exchange does, it allows for the financial inclusion. So it's like having that wall, putting a spigot in that wall and being able to turn it so that you get just the right amount of foreign direct investment to combine with the financial inclusion of the people that are here. So one of our big mottos is, which has been extremely popular, is moving people from consumers to owners.
Yeah.
So every part of the revenue generating projects that come through the exchange, the average run-of-the-mill average Bahamian gets a chance to participate in this financially. And so that's one of the goals of the exchange. And we, like I say, it's a new foreign direct investment model. So people can bring in their ideas, they can get them funded here. And that's the what's driving us.
Really interesting altogether. And so just give us a quick rundown, a few statistics about the Bahamas. Population's about 400 and something thousand.
Yeah, about 400,000. I think it was 369 at the last census, but there are a few more people that I think we missed. So
I think that's the story. Well, I mean, with how many islands in the overall archipelago?
Yeah, technically 700 islands, but some of them are like a rock.
Right.
So there are only about 26 that actually have villages and habitats on it.
Even so, with 26 islands, you can see how a couple of thousand people could easily have managed to lose themselves on the other side, or be out windsurfing at the time when they were doing the census, I suppose. It's,
yes.
Always possible, but you wouldn't quite count everybody when you're running around the place. It's really interesting. So you're very, very close also geographically to the USA.
Yes, from our island of Bimini, I'm told we can see the lights of Miami.
Wow.
So we were right on the footstep of the world's largest capital markets.
Right.
And that gives us a great advantage, because many of the Bahamians and Americans have commingled. And for example, one thing that not many people may realize, but we drive a lot of South Florida's economy. We put like $3 billion a year into South Florida's economy. So there's not just, it's not a one-way flow. It's actually goes both ways. So the Bahamas is known to Americans, particularly around the East Coast. Most people have had a trip here or want to be here, and they're comfortable being here. And so we know how to with our tourist product to work with American markets.
Mhm.
Even though we're a part of the Commonwealth,
Yes.
and some of our tradition and architecture, etc., is very British. We are so close to America that we have a lot in common with America.
So that's an interesting thing, because I mean, yesterday we were driving around in Nassau and you were showing us, and we went from, I think it must be one of the fastest moves in the world between the cricket ground and the baseball ground, and they're really only about 400 or 500 meters away. It's an interesting clash of cricketing cultures in a way between the different sports that are here.
Yeah, for us, it's not a clash of culture; it's our norm.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, it's a very interesting division to see how. Yes, there is considerable American influence. There's obviously American investment in resorts and so on. So you're getting a huge amount of tourism from the USA.
Yes.
It was indicative to me landing. I love the fact that a landing card says, did you arrive via, I think it was American, British Airways, JetBlue, or Delta, or another airline. I think that's quite an interesting landing card, which says a lot about the way that the country is linked. With obviously the UK providing an incredible bridge for the rest of the world, but obviously 90% of your flights are coming from the United States of America.
Yes, and so that is really a great business advantage as well, because we're a friendly nation. We don't have an army. We have a defense force for immigration purposes and drug interdiction, etc.
Yes.
But we have always been great friends with America. Now, previously, our jurisdiction has been known as an offshore center where people come to have their wealth managed. But of course, with the OECD countries now blacklisting countries, we are moving away from that model because it's not sustainable. And we don't want to be known so much as an offshore center, more as a nearshore center.
Yes.
Somewhere where you can come and you can develop your company through incubators and be funded through exchanges, and more like a large deal room. That's what we're viewing the new financial markets of our country.
Interesting. So the deal room archipelago of the Bahamas. And in order to get there, you've started now with crowdfunding.
Yes.
So how's that been? I mean, we're only 40 days or something into the first crowdfunding programs?
Well, it's been incredible in the sense that we launched and we immediately got about 2% of the population within the first month to sign in, which means the appetite is really, really there. Of course, it overwhelmed us. We did not anticipate it, so we had to very quickly bring our game up in our back end. I'm so happy that we had decided to make the technological decisions that we did, because we were able to move very rapidly in improving our processes. For example, we use DocuWare, which is a German company, to hold a lot of our information, and we were able to easily maneuver and make our forms more accessible and things of that nature. So I mean, it's good to. There's an advantage to being in the small country in that everybody. It's not difficult for me to get an appointment with the head of the Securities Commission. That's a person that's known to me and that is very responsive, or even with the Prime Minister of the Bahamas. So one thing that we're really excited about is having you down here, because we're going to be doing, as you know, a session down here where we have many of the movers and the shakers for the first time are going to really understand what an exchange can do as a growth engine. And so part of the ArawakX, our exchange, is to make known certain people so that we can use it for economic recovery and for better relations between our nation and other nations.
And that's coming up on Thursday. If you're watching this this week, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to be at the Bahamas Resort here in Nassau in the Bahamas. The keynote speakers are going to be, a famous husband and wife team. Patrick L. Young is going to be talking about exchanges and markets, and the host of PhD, Positivity Hacks Delivered, which is also going to be coming from Nassau in the Bahamas this week. Beata Young, she's going to be presenting in the afternoon, talking about startups and the accelerator incubator culture. So come along, join us. It's going to be a great event altogether. The first of the, I'm sure, many investor conferences we're going to see, and we're going to see some exciting pitching from your first two crowdfunding projects. So, so who are the guys that are on the ramp at the moment, raising money?
Well, like I said, we're very excited because we have the Red Lobster franchise for the Caribbean. Now, Red Lobster is very popular amongst Caribbean people. When they go into Miami and they look for the Red Lobster, so it's quite famous there. So we're very certain that it's going to do well here. In fact, it's doing so well, they have like 1,000 retail investors that have never invested before. And then we have also a company that's, I'm not allowed to boast of the company as if I'm suggesting that somebody should invest in the company. I'm just telling you the facts of the company.
Do your own research, ladies and gentlemen. That most important acronym, we're always talking about it, Valerian blockchain on our social media, DYOR. The RC is simply explaining who the companies are that are coming to the crowdfunding platform at the moment.
Yes.
Carry on.
And the second company is, I'm so excited about it because it's a virtual or augmented reality tourism company. So imagine, for example, that you go downtown and you can order a tour, and Blackbeard appears as an augmented character, and he actually explains to you on your tour the various elements, the various historical elements of the Bahamas. And so it's all on your telephone, and it's an augmented reality platform. We know that the Bahamas has been mapped out and they have a lot of characters and they can do a lot. So the Bahamas itself, being a tourism market, is only the test point for this particular company. We know that this is going to be a platform that anybody can use anywhere, and content developers can put their augmented characters and turn almost anything into a tourist attraction. So we're quite excited.
That sounds really, really interesting altogether. And just to be clear, at the moment, the crowdfunding is open. Who is eligible for an account at ArawakX at the present time?
At the moment, anybody resident in the Bahamas and accredited investors from away. And accredited investors.
Accredited investors. Okay. So what is the qualification for accreditation?
So typically, an accredited investor would have to make over a certain amount of money or have a certain amount in assets, and it's according to the rules of that particular country. So it'll be different. Some of them call them, I think, maybe sophisticated investors.
Yes, sophisticated investors,
right.
So the UK regime,
what we're doing is we're working to expand into different markets. Like we just opened up an office in Silicon Valley and about to open up an office in the US. So we would expand into get a crowdfunding portal in the US, as well as in every other country in the Caribbean and beyond. But that's our philosophy now, to expand into these different markets to allow anybody to be able to invest legally and comfortably in these markets.
That's great. So you're getting to grips then with the idea of getting into Reg CF, Reg A, and in due course in the USA, and you're trying. That's a very, very interesting approach, and therefore you'll be able to more easily access all of that sort of retail flow.
Exactly.
We had a great show last week actually with Shari Noonan, the boss of Rialto Market. She was talking to us about the Reg CF, Reg A marketplace, if you're interested in more details and understanding that better. Or indeed, we had a number of weeks ago, just before summer, David Wheel IV, the father of crowdfunding, no less. He was talking all about those things. Yeah, it was very, very educational. I mean, my goodness. I almost have to say, you think that you've had difficulties. I mean, you only took 4 years to get your platform together. There's a man who spent, I think, 15 years trying to get crowdfunding into the United States of America. It's quite an achievement.
Very brilliant. Very
brilliant altogether. So tell me one thing. I know that a lot of people are always interested. Some people don't know the history of the Bahamas, perhaps as well as they ought to. They do recognize certainly Blackbeard the pirate, who you mentioned a few seconds ago. He seems to be very famous. He's nearly as famous as some of the great Bahamian sprinters we've had over the years.
Well, most famous foreign investor, if you will,
yes,
to use the term lightly, or some would say foreign plunderer, was Christopher Columbus.
Christopher Columbus,
and in fact, the landfall in the New World, as recognized by the Europeans, was in 1492 in one of the islands of the Bahamas.
Wow.
And so that's where our history kind of began.
Yes.
Over a period of time, the English we became a part of under the English rule, and that happened that in 1973 we received our independence, and although we remain a part of the Commonwealth, we are an independent nation. So we've gone through some changes, but basically it was an English colony.
Yep.
And for the most part, there were some people that came down after the Revolution of the United States.
Yes.
And they brought slaves with them. They were called the Loyalists.
Okay.
And but the slavery here was different because we didn't have the soil for the agriculture. So it was slightly different and not as harsh as in some of the other islands. So all slavery is harsh, but it wasn't when you're looking at degrees of level of harshness.
Yeah.
So what happened is that eventually the Bahamas developed into a sort of a touristic area, and then international suffrage came for us in the 60s, and everybody had the same vote, and so we're now a fully democratized country since 67, independent since 1973.
And it's also interesting because during that point, previously the Bahamas had been, if I remember correctly, administered along with the Turks and Caicos Islands.
Yes.
But you went for independence, Turks and Caicos Islands, they decided to stay behind. Those guys just a bit to the east.
Most of us, and myself included, have a Turks and Caicos grandfather.
Right, right.
So we were very, very close
Yes.
to them. In fact, almost like the same country.
But
the Turks is a great place as well. And that's why we have a Caribbean approach.
Yes.
So we say the Bahamas and the Caribbean, we're nearshoring here, but we want to bring along all these different people in the Caribbean because we're really one people, just got off of the boat at different times for the most part.
Different points of departure.
Yeah.
But it's very interesting when you look at, the Caribbean marketplace. It has had I would say in some ways a sort of haphazard relationship with capital markets. We don't want to pick on any particular successes or failures, whatever, although I will mention one from my side, which was, I was involved at one stage with the Aruba Stock Exchange, which disappointingly didn't pull through. And it does become very difficult. Now, I think that was probably just when we were on the cusp of going digital.
Yes.
You've obviously brought this exchange together. You're completely born digital. You're a fully fledged electronic marketplace. What are the biggest challenges ahead for the exchange?
I think in expansion, that we have to make sure that we choose the right partners.
Yeah.
And the expansion doesn't look like a form of neo-colonialism.
Yes.
But rather enhancement of the people that are there, so that whichever islands or places we go to, we allow the democratization of finance, that the persons that are resident there can participate in their economy. That idea of financial inclusion must run through all levels of expansion, and on both sides, for those who have ideas that they want to bring to the forefront, brands that they want to bring into places like the United States or expand to the Caribbean. So I think that the biggest challenge will just be to, how do you do that? How do you create an exponential organization in the Caribbean? And when working with the Caribbean is somewhat like herding cats. So I am unafraid of any competition ever to come down here who was not born here and does not understand. There are some things that we culturally do that somebody who was not really native to here will never understand. But we can understand the American side, the North American, European side, and also the African side to some extent, because we're part of that diaspora. So we're like perfectly situated culturally. You mentioned before how it's a combination of the European and the American. Well, it's a combination of the African as well.
Yes.
So we see ourselves as being a culturally center that can bring capital markets with inclusion to all of these areas.
It's really interesting, this whole inclusion point and relating the real economy to financial markets, something that I think a lot of the parish of exchanges have rather lost track of in a certain way. the way you're going about this, I'm intrigued, because we're not actually in your executive office at the moment. We're actually in one of your outreach centers, if I can put it that way. Perhaps you can explain to us this strategy.
Sure. So a huge portion of what we do is related to education. Most people are not financially literate.
Mm-hmm.
Some might say most financial experts are not financially literate, at least with some, and certainly a lot of people in
a fair comment. Yes.
In government and regulation are not commercially minded. Let me say that, to be fair to them. So we have a huge education outreach for all levels, where we can introduce people to what it is to participate in the capital markets, what it is to own a part of a company, how to evaluate companies. Why is it that we chose primary markets where some value is created and a value chain is created? So you will notice like it's very popular to do crypto type exchanges, but while we view the technology from it, the blockchain technology, as being absolutely some of the most wonderful thing you can imagine in terms of being able to be fully digital, what we do has to impact real people.
Yeah.
It has to be a guy takes an idea and he's doing something innovative, and therefore that innovation creates jobs and adds value of some sort to people's lives. That's what we like with the startup culture.
The startup culture. And so this center, I'm sorry, I've forgotten the acronym for it again.
It's a Customer Investor Education Center.
Wow.
So it is how we are taking everyone along on that journey, not assuming that people are sophisticated investors, but actually assuming that we all need to learn along the way. And so this is a hallmark. They're completely free. This is the first one, and we're about to have them all over the islands and all over everywhere that we expand. We will have this element of education.
That's really, really interesting. So it's a kind of drop-in center where you can come in and ask questions, you can find out what's going on, you can run little seminars and meetings here. And the aim is to have several of those across the Bahamas.
Yes, initially across the Bahamas, and wherever else we expand. So that people, I think one of the big challenges with saying you're digital is people thinking you're less human. No. Yes. I mean, Apple certainly showed that with their Apple stores.
Yes.
You still need the interface between the human being. It just changes. And I think it changes towards education and customer service, so the person feels comfortable with what they're getting.
Yeah.
And so that's what the CIECs are all about.
I think it's a fantastic idea. And certainly it's a very interesting one. It's also, if I may say so, quite ambitious when you've got half a dozen or more quite populous islands around the Bahamas.
Yeah, it is ambitious, but we view everybody that walks in as a future customer. And since, our model to make money is off of a capital raise, if we get more and more people that are participating, it really is not as expensive as it would seem, because everybody that comes through there is a potential customer for life, hopefully.
Well, certainly it's very interesting. I mean, if you can manage to adopt a certain proportion, and I think that's a sensational statistic. I mean, the fact that in the first couple of weeks of operation, you signed up 2% of the entire population, which is actually amazing, because when you think about that as a percentage, even as a number, I mean, it's really, really impressive in terms of where you've managed to bring the country very, very quickly. So how does the next tier work? I mean, you've got a couple of crowdfundings at the moment. They're almost halfway through their 90-day period, if I'm not correct. You're looking at increasing the numbers of crowdfundings. What sort of amounts of money do you think is going to be the sweet spot for raising?
I think right now, from our early data, the sweet spot is around $1 or $2 million.
Okay.
So that's going to be around. Now, our initial license is similar to the CF license, with up to 5 million. But from what we're saying initially, Now, we haven't fully involved our American investor ecosystem, which we think will add another boost to it.
Yes.
We have engaged some partnerships. One we have with the Pendry Cannon Group, which creates tremendous investor ecosystems. Some of them as big as $6 million.
Wow.
So we're in the middle of working with them on creating a publishing brand for the Caribbean.
Very good.
So that people who look we would be branded. We understand that the crowdfunding business is 50% marketing.
Yes.
And
yes.
so and I would say it's marketing, which includes networking and building a brand so people know where to look. So that's what once that's developed, we feel that number will jump substantially. Now, in terms of companies that we have in the pipeline, we have over 200 companies right now that are seeking to be funded, and some of them are U.S. companies. Some of them they're from all over the Caribbean. Of course, the majority being centered from the Bahamas.
Fascinating. And in terms of the Bahamas, for starters, what's your ambition?
Well, I want a place that to leave a better place for my grandchildren, and where the economy, I feel, can grow 4 or 5 times. I think the economy is very restrained because we have, quite frankly, relied on that tourism product, and we have not been as open an economy to people that would like to be a part of our economy, to be inclusive in our economy. Inclusion means everybody.
Yes.
And so the challenge for the Bahamas is how do you remain Bahamian and you retain your culture while allowing people to participate in the various elements. And I think that the ArawakX exchange is the way to do it. I think that that's a way of controlling it and building up. And I think that is the new engine of growth. By the way, we chose the name Arawak.
Yes.
Because there were various tribes that Columbus met here.
Yes.
The language, though, the trading language, we came to understand through our research, was that of the Arawak tribe. So everybody traded in the Arawak language. So it's a nod to the original inhabitants here of the trading language, Arawak, and we call it X for exchange.
Well, no, I think it's great. It's certainly a very arresting brand, and it's interesting to see, and it gives you a unique name. It's at the start of the alphabet as well, which is very handy compared to a lot of other places. Apart from Armenia, there aren't too many exchanges that can manage to get themselves under A to start with. Although we used to have the American Stock Exchange, and we were subsumed into Nasdaq a number of years ago. When you look at the economy of the Bahamas and you look at your opportunities, your potential crowdfunding, and then subsequently, of course, you'll get to SME listings and so on. What is a typical Bahamian entrepreneur looking like? Or is there a typical Bahamian entrepreneur?
Well, first of all, it's very, very varied in terms of the type of person. But the one thing that they have in common is most companies are a mess. They're not ready. And so they don't understand various elements. And so what we do is we try to develop our ecosystem because we want to do everything at an arm's length. For example, a person will come and they will have maybe even have an operation already up, and let's say they want to expand their brand into different islands. We say, okay, you have to work with a business developer to develop what we call is a team that delivers magic.
Okay.
And I'm so happy with this. I feel so clever about it because I made this up myself. That's not true. Other people made it up, but I just use it all the time. Team stands for the executive, advisors, and management.
Okay.
Can deliver a company that produces a market that is accessible and has growth of at least 10 times.
Right.
Is innovative and has the right corporate governance structure. So, a team that delivers magic. So what we're trying to do is move companies in the Caribbean and in America to this point. I spent a lot of time in America as well. It's not as if they're all fabulously run as well.
Mm-hmm.
So as we see that there's a lot of help needed, and that is what we want to bring companies to that point, so that somebody looking at a company listed on the exchange knows that they have the proper corporate governance, that they've been properly vetted.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I noticed one thing with a lot of platforms,
Yes.
that you pay your fee and you go on.
Yes.
Or you're incorporated, you tick a couple of boxes and you go on. Well, I can in good conscience do that because I don't know these people. I need to be able to walk into their offices. I need to be able to make sure it's a real company. And I think that's how we are going to develop our brand. And because it takes a while for a company to get there, all along the way, there are people in the ecosystem that are fed, the business developers, the guys who create the business plan, the marketing houses,
Mm-hmm.
the people that shoot the videos for them, the people that make them accessible to the average person to know that this is a great project.
Yeah.
All of that value chain is fed by doing this vetting process. And so that's how we think we'll have tremendous economic growth.
That's such an interesting holistic approach, because when you think about a lot of exchanges are very de minimis. And as you say, crowdfunding platforms are incredibly de minimis. I mean, it's more or less, can you fill in the form and then we'll let you list on our platform, which is certainly a very different issue. What's the next stage of the process like when the company, I mean, I appreciate you're only in the first two crowdfundings now, but how do you envision what's going to be the sort of the post-sales service once the companies have raised their first round of money?
Right. Well, so these companies, of course, they have no way of handling 1,000 shareholders.
Mm-hmm.
And, so one value add is a secondary market.
Yes.
Which will likely be very illiquid initially.
Mm-hmm.
And so to support their the way they communicate with their new investors,
yes,
with their new owners, the exchange plays a role in that. So to be able to send out notices, deliver dividends, all of these things, because they're being digitally done. And one thing that we are very, very proud of is that we are the first exchange to use central bank digital currency, of which the Bahamas is a pioneer. And so we can easily communicate and go through payment without being wrecked by the banks. You know?
Okay. So the central bank digital currency, that's the sand dollar.
Yes.
Now the sand dollar, remind me, that's quite interesting because it's not really intended to be a store, a repository of money. It really is aimed at being a facilitator of payments, if I understand correctly.
Yes, its emphasis is on interoperability. It is a representation of the Bahamian dollar, which is pegged 1-to-1 with the US dollar. So that's another selling point or strong point that we have, that if you're transacting in this coin, in this sand dollar, that you're really transacting in something equivalent to the US dollar, backed by our central bank. And so the idea behind it, the biggest idea behind it, is interoperability.
Right.
Also, because of the predatory practices of the banks here, what happens now is you have financial inclusion, because many people do not have bank accounts.
Right.
So you can also, banks are not in these far-flung islands.
Right.
So their people are not able to be serviced in these far-flung islands. So we make partnerships with existing PSPs, payment service providers, and we use them to deliver the payment side of our product, but it makes it cheap enough to use. You know, there's no sense giving the guy a dollar on a dividend because he has a small amount of shares, and the bank causing him $15 to deliver it.
Yeah. So in terms of the Bahamian banking system, I mean, there are some credit institutions or mutuals or SNLs or things like that, or something, and there are PSPs as well as the banks. Is that right?
Yes. The banks, 85% of the small business loans in this country are rejected. So the banks have decided that we're not in the business of loans, we're in the business of fees. And so it's what they would do. A young person comes in there to buy a truck for a business or something. They'll try to convince them to buy a Mercedes. So they want to do consumer loans and get very high exorbitant rates. And they find their practices very predatory. In fact, 20 years ago, I call them an oligopoly.
Yes.
And people very upset at that. Now, the IDB has said this is an oligopoly. Yes. Well, I'm living here, so I know what was happening.
So we're here with D'Arcy Rahming Sr. He's the chairman and CEO of ArawakX, a new pan-Caribbean exchange. They've started in the Bahamas. The focus is on SME business. Quite fascinating to hear those really quite scary statistics. 85% of all small business loans being refused in the Bahamas. That's certainly not a great thing for the entrepreneur of today. And obviously that's why you've come in with an equity crowdfunding product. How do you think the overall response to your product has been from entrepreneurs? Are they just flabbergasted? Is it still too early for them to really understand and get their heads around it?
People are loving it.
Great.
We have struck a chord, and we can tell because we've had a recent election.
Yes.
And both parties adopted the idea of kind of consumers. We need to have more owners as well as consumers. It's just struck a chord with everybody across all of the political divide. And so people are loving it, and we're just trying to get organized and to the point where the institutional investors also see the value in what we're doing. So the crowd itself has come in very aggressively, and right now we're trying to get the institutional investors to see that this is a new model, a better way.
Excellent. And so you have this amazing thing. You've signed up into 4 figures of investors already. What sort of people are signing up for the crowdfunding platform as investors?
Well, across the spectrum, which is very interesting to me because this is a small town, I can see the list and I know the names. So we have everybody from high-ranking government officials, senior business people with that would be considered high net worth individuals, down to a guy that can't provide a utility bill because he's virtually homeless. He doesn't own a home. So that was one of the ideas, is that for as low as $25, and we've actually brought it down to as low as $16, somebody could become a shareholder.
That's really interesting. Really interesting altogether. And so when you can start with a mere $16. Anyone can invest in the Bahamas. You've got a very strong AML KYC ethos you've been explaining, but at the same time, it's open to everybody, financial inclusion. What are the steps you need to really help improve financial inclusion in the Bahamas? And what are the things that you're going to need help with beyond simply the ArawakX framework?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing that we need help with is to develop our ecosystem. So for people out there who want to lend some of their expertise to some of these up and coming companies as advisors, and to bring their networks to them, some of them, this is really a great need. That the quality of offering that we have will increase because people who are experienced come on their boards and are able to support them. We are in a second round of funding. We need to grow. We need money. And we want to finance our growth as opposed to trying to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. So we're looking for strategic alliances with people that fit our ethos and that want to have an equity share in us as well. So all of these things are possible in terms of us to develop further with where we're going.
Okay, that's really interesting. And so obviously you're going to need some more funding to manage to take it forward. You've already had some investment. You yourself have put a considerable amount of money into it, as well as time over the course of the last 4 years and more.
I didn't have a gray beard before I began this.
No, I can understand that. That's certainly something that, well, I think it turns us all a little bit grey building exchanges sooner or later. It's always an interesting process. What's it like dealing with, I mean, say you've just had an election here. There's been quite a turnaround in the government. I mean, pretty much from what I can see out of, what are the 38 MPs, and the government, the outgoing government was reduced all the way down to 7 or 8 MPs. The new government is 31 or so MPs. Very good diversity, I do believe, as well. 8 or 9 ladies being elected.
That's something that the country itself, both parties, are very proud of the number of women that are participating in the political sphere.
Percentage-wise, you're right up there with huge numbers of Western democracies in Europe, for example. It's really, really encouraging to see. So you mentioned earlier on that if you need to, you can go and see the Prime Minister and talk to him. I'm not asking you what's going on in the private conversations there, obviously, but what are the things that you would like to see ideally in the Bahamas that would improve the environment for the exchange?
Well, we want to reduce the friction of foreign direct investment.
Okay.
That's the primary thing. And what we want is that anything less than 10 million in the aggregate, for it to be able to be done through the exchange. We already have all of the reporting capabilities, the KYC capabilities. Once we've put an investor through the exchange, there's no reason for them to go through that through the government and through the central bank again. So that is the primary thing, is to increase the ease of doing business, to allow foreign direct investment in and out of the country in a controlled manner.
Great. That's really, really interesting. So you want to make sure that you're organized, you're controlled. We want to keep all of those acronyms happy, like FATF and all of those sorts of people with their lovely task forces that drop in and make sure that everybody's behaving themselves very reasonably. You're trying to raise the literacy over all of the country. Is there any particular sector at the moment that really excites you, that you think can be ideal for the Bahamas?
Yes, I'm excited by, quite frankly, the new graduates, the people that are coming back, and some of the millennials that will now be able to, instead of having to, like during my years, most of my years, I was in the United States of America because I couldn't find a comparable job here. So I'm very excited at that reversal of the brain drain, and very proud to say that there are a few people in our company whose average age is about 33.
Right.
And that there are quite a few people that have come back from away, and they're working in similar jobs of similar capacities in terms of what we're able to pay them. So I'm very happy about that. So it's a reversal of the brain drain, and it is that group, the millennials and the one after it, that I'm most excited to be supporting.
So what do you think's bringing? What do you think is helping reverse that brain drain?
Well, it's just the idea of the type of company that we are. And when we, as we use with that acronym, do the team that delivers magic, we are in effect consulting with these companies before they vet, so they understand a new culture that's necessary. And it's not just a stodgy old company that's coming forward. We don't think that company can really survive in this age. It has to be a technology savvy company.
Yes.
It has to be a company that is able to understand the environment and where it fits in the ecosystem, and that it needs other people. And all of these things are very new to some of the older companies.
Yes, it's interesting because, I mean, we were talking before the show, you were driving around showing us some places and so on. I mean, the concept of Bahamian industry is not, it's almost not present. I mean, these days, there's no sort of real heavy industry around, or very, very little of it. Tourism is a huge behemoth, as is banking, financial services. Yeah,
I think that there's very little that is organized well. Even though there is quite a lot of diversity in companies that want to start, but they don't have the capital to start. So, for example, the Small Business Development Center, which was developed a few years ago, has demonstrated that there's some like 4,500 companies here
Wow.
that were trying to advance themselves, and these companies are across every spectrum. But many of them will never realize their dreams and goals without being properly funded.
Right. No, that's obviously going to be a huge challenge, and that's going to be very difficult going forward. So therefore, let me just ask you one last question to bring this whole conversation full circle, DRC. You read Capital Market Revolution, my original book, 21 years ago, 22 years ago as it is now. You gave it a very fulsome review, for which I still hugely appreciate the message you were portraying, not just to the world, but I think very much focused to the Bahamas, in the Bahamas Tribune, if I remember correctly. Where do you think the capital market revolution goes next?
I think that this idea of complete financial inclusion is which was the idea that struck out, that really captured me, and that it would be done through the internet.
Yes.
And it would be done through the fintech.
Yes.
So I think that exactly the things that you predicted finally made to come into fruition with organizations like ArawakX. Yeah.
On that note of inclusion, of a digital future, I think it's great, isn't it? I mean, if you'd looked at it 22 years ago when I wrote that book, Capital Market Revolution, you were reviewing it for the Bahamian papers. If we'd actually sat here and said, in 20 years' time, we'll be sitting here talking over the internet like it's proper television, people would have laughed at you. And yet now it's a habit. Yes. I mean, in fact, you're talking about your workforce. I mean, the under 30s, the 33 years and under. I mean, some of them have barely got the concept of what a television is anymore. Yes. I mean, they're used to the idea that that's basically something their mobile phone produces via YouTube. And it's really, really interesting. You're talking about, I love this acronym, Team Magic. We're here at the Customer Investor Education Center, the first one that ArawakX have built. You've got offices coming in the USA, on the East Coast and on the West Coast in Silicon Valley. You're promoting an incredible inclusion for all investors and indeed all companies. I mean, ArawakX is open for business for crowdfunding now. I love this whole nature of the deal room archipelago of the Bahamas. You've got a 200 company pipeline. 2% of the population signed up to the platform within a matter of weeks of you launching. You've got the opportunity to invest right now in Red Lobster, with 1,000 investors have already joined that one. And indeed, the whole concept of augmented reality through tourism, that's just incredible altogether. It's been absolutely a joy to be here with you. I have to say that it has been incredibly arduous in the 48 hours that we've been in the Bahamas so far. Here we've been, you can see, ladies and gentlemen, the struggles we had yesterday. We were enjoying the delightful hospitality. Thank you very, very much to RC, and that's your beautiful and wonderful wife, Benita, with us there as we're looking out over another one of those gorgeous ocean views from the island of paradise into an ocean of paradise altogether. It's absolutely incredible for me coming here and working on the beach. And coming soon, ladies and gentlemen, coming up on Thursday, we're going to be having this first Investor Ecosystem Special Conference. There are two fabulous keynote speakers amongst many. There's my good self, Patrick L. Young. I'm going to be giving a discussion about all sort of aspects to exchanges and GDP. And there she is, the moody genius of PhD herself, the Ati Young. She's going to be talking about startups and the startup ecosystem in the Bahamas and beyond. You can join us at the Bahamas Convention Center on Thursday. It only really remains from me, Patrick L. Young, to say thank you very much. Next week, we are having a week off in between series, as this is the end of Series 7, and we got to sit back and really contemplate the meaning of 42, the ultimate answer to life, the universe, and everything, according to Douglas Adams and the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. We're going to be back in 2 weeks' time. We're going to have a great session then. It's going to be Chris Giancarlo, Crypto Dad. He's going to be talking to us on the day his book launches. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to say this is Patrick L. Young. This has been the ArawakX studios in Nassau. DRC Rahming, thank you. And I really, really am so excited